All right, so here we're going to do a bit of a talk on Daoism. And there generally people hold that there are two types of Daoism, philosophical Daoism and religious Daoism, and I'm going to talk about both. First of all, philosophical Daoism is basically based on two key books by two key thinkers here, Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu. As you can see here, Lao Tzu apparently lived around 600 BC, and it's a bit more of a legend. We don't have that much hard historical data around him, but he most likely, of course, existed. And the tradition is that he was the guardian, the custodian of a royal library, the keeper of the books there, and consequently was a very learned man. However, the tradition has it that he became disgusted with the corruption and decay that was taking place in China at that time at the level of government. As I had mentioned in previous recording, that this is a time where we're not quite yet to the Warring States period, but things are heading that way, of a total collapse of any kind of unity, where China is broken up into various sections run by warlords, each battling each other out, trying to gain power over the whole of China. And so things are increasingly in decay here. So he, being disgusted with what he saw going on around him, decided to leave society, leave China was his vision, and he heads west. And as he's heading west, he needs to pass through the gatekeeper, sort of like a border crossing, who recognized him as being the wise one, Lao Tzu, and he begged of him to leave his wisdom behind. And so he did, by writing the book that becomes known as the Tao Te Ching, which means the book on the way and its power. Okay, so that becomes very foundational. It's one of the key texts in philosophical Taoism that teaches the philosophy behind Taoism in terms of what the Tao is and how it all works. Well, then the second key figure here is Chuang Tzu, who is a little bit later, as you can see here, the dates, 369 to 286 BC. And he also was a government official who, like Lao Tzu, also decided to leave corrupt society, being disgusted with what was going on around him. And so he withdrew into the forest, and his goal was to truly be living in harmony with the Tao. So these are the two key sources for philosophical Taoism. And just before I continue, just to make a note here, that in the mid-late 1980s, okay, like I think it was 86 or so, the Chinese government changed how Chinese letters and characters would be transliterated into English. And so Tao used to be written with a T. You can see there how Lao Tzu used to be written, how the Tao Te Ching used to be written, okay, again with a T and whatnot. You can just see that for yourself, and how Chuang Tzu used to be written, along with, you know, a number of other various rather popular Chinese words. And just in case you are looking for information, sometimes you'll find it under Daoism with a T or with a D. And just so you're not confused and you know that they're really referring to the same thing. Okay. And this here, I just put it, this is another Daoist type symbol sometimes used that has the phoenix and the dragon, two very popular symbols for yin and yang. Okay. Well, now in terms of the teachings here in Taoism, we have the key fundamental concept is that of the Tao. And the word the Tao is often translated as the way, but yet it's said even blatantly in the Tao Te Ching that the way that can be described, put into words, talked about, is not ever the true absolute Tao or way. It's fundamentally beyond human language and concept in various ways. It's very difficult to describe. The Tao constitutes a type of absolute, but it's an absolute that is not God in the usual sense of how we think of God. It is an ultimate reality, but it really is, I like to think of it as just nature, reality itself, without it being personified as being rooted in divine intelligence and the way most people think of God. So the Tao is often described as the mother of the universe, the source of all that is and also that which is not. Okay, it just is what is, the totality of reality, right? And fundamentally, its nature is amoral, not immoral, but amoral, totally neutral. It doesn't judge something as good or evil, right? It is amoral in the sense of totally neutral. It is non-purposive. It's not like a God with a will that has a purpose and a plan, okay, that's directing history or created with a sense of purpose, the universe, okay. It's non-purposive. The Tao is also fundamentally unknowable, a deep mystery of reality, and is something that is part of nature and life, reality. It's just constant flow, constant movement, okay, constantly moving and flowing, and is spontaneous. Again, non-purposive, but spontaneous. And it is impersonal. As I mentioned, it's not a God. So it's basically reality itself. And as I mentioned, it's both what is and what is not, okay? And so it's held that this reality, the Tao, flows constantly from non-being to being, and then back to non-being and to being. It's a constant flow and movement from non-being to being. So when we're talking about non-being, the state of non-being is sort of like this cosmic soup of formless, undifferentiated chaos, where everything exists in a state of potentiality. It's all there ready to, boom, come into being, but it's just chaotic potentiality, right? Without any kind of differentiation. It's neither this nor that, right? It's a state of non-being. And from the state of non-being, it then moves into beingness, where things become differentiated. There's distinctions between a this and a that. There is order. There's an actualization of all that potentiality. Okay, so it goes from formless to form. And it's in constant process, movement, and flow. Okay, constant flow and movement. And so you'll see here to the right, a classic kind of Daoist painting, which reflects the view of reality here, the view of the Tao. And so you see here, it's a very soft kind of painting, where the mountains are soft and they kind of are misty, and they blend in with the sky, blends in with the earth, and then the trees are rather dominant. So what's dominant in this picture is nature itself. And that's the Tao, the universe. And then when you look closely, you see, oh, there's a little figure there, okay? A little Daoist monk there, nestled there on a bit of a pathway. But you didn't really see that at first. And that's the idea of the Tao, is that the Tao is flowing, flows through the sky, to the mountains, to the earth, through the trees, through you, through me. Everything is embedded in this flow of the Tao. There aren't those hard lines of differentiation of this versus the that, because everything is the Tao. All right, it's all in a sense a flow and movement of the Tao from one thing to another. And so how the Tao operates is the Tao moves through and works with the dual principles of yin and yang, okay, yin and yang. And this is the classic kind of imagery for yin and yang. Yang is sort of on the left, that's predominantly white with a black dot in the middle, all right? And on the right, that's dark, is yin with a white dot in the middle. And so they represent the opposites of reality. So as you can see here, yang, it represents the masculine, positive, sunlight, heaven, active, fire, energetic, heat-driven, goal-oriented, vigor, intellect, awake, like many things, but predominantly like summer, life, heat, energy. It's expansive, right? It's hard. Over to the right, the yin is the opposite. It is the feminine. It is, instead of sun, it's moon. Instead of day, it's night. It's dark. It's of the earth. Is more passive instead of active. And it is contractive. It contracts, all right, instead of expands. It is soft, yielding, right? And so you can kind of see there what it's all associated with. And so life is a constant kind of balancing and movement and flow from yin to yang, like it is from day to night, summer to winter, okay, and life to death. When a baby is born, the baby is full of young energy and is just brimming with this life force energy and vitality. And as you get older, yang shrinks and yin becomes dominant, right? But the catch is, as you can see here in this picture, they're not polarized as opposite. Within yang is the beginnings, the birthing, the seed for yin. And within yin is the birthing, the seed, that white dot, that is the beginnings and birthing of young. Okay, so they include each other. The one goes into the other then goes back into the other one, and they flow into each other. So they're fundamentally interconnected dance, not a rigid separate polarization, but a duality of where one flows into the other and then back again. You know, like summer becomes winter, then becomes summer, then becomes winter. So that's a key thing here. So as a result, we should not polarize the two and judge one as being good and the other as bad. Okay, a part of life and nature is a flow always from one thing to another, from cold to heat, from summer to winter, from birth to death. It's a natural flow of the course of life is working through these two principles. And so consequently, we have then the key idea in Daoist philosophy is what's often called the relativity or sometimes identity of opposites. And herein we find contextualized the human dilemma or the human problem. Since the Tao encompasses all that is, opposites do not remain opposite, but they flow one into the other, as I just mentioned, previously, right? The Tao is both night and day. The Tao is both life and death, both being and non-being, both winter and summer, both drought and flood. Okay, the Tao contains within itself all opposites and this constant flow and of this duality. Okay, so the Tao, the absolute, the ultimate of what is both of these things. But we humans, what we tend to want to do is we want to polarize things. And we absolutize one thing as being good and this other thing as being bad. And we kind of separate things and then make them static. Okay, so they don't move, they're sort of frozen, they become static. And then we absolutize it, right? And so we then, through our cultural conditioning and social conditioning, we then program ourselves to think that one thing is good and another thing is bad, right? And then we become resistant and we fight what we call bad, okay, resist it, and try to coerce what we think is good and what we think we want and need. Okay, so we'll look at nature, right, where you look at the duck's legs and they're short and the crane's legs are so long, and we think, well, that's not right. I need to fix that. I need to change it. And so we tend to go against nature, against the flow of the Tao, and we coerce things, right? We either resist and fight it, or we force it to go another way that we want it to. And so how this shows up is that we will judge something, that it is bad to be poor, to be old, to be weak, to be ugly, all right? And then we judge and hold to and absolutize the idea that it is good to be rich and powerful and young and beautiful, okay? And so as a result of that, well, then we think, okay, how can I be rich? How can I be powerful? And people will then, out of greed and ambition, cause other people to suffer. They will rob, they will steal, they will kill, they will go to war. Okay. Why? Because they believe that it is good to be rich and powerful, for example, right? This is the key thing that they're addressing. It was the corruption at that time in China. So the result is that we humans then tend to resist what is and coerce what isn't into being. And so we're always going against the Tao and end up creating so much suffering and conflict as a result. Okay. And so it's that fighting against the Tao that creates problems, that creates the human dilemma. And if we go with the Tao and be in harmony with the Tao and go with the flow of the natural course of things, the natural flow of the processes of yin and yang, then we'll be in harmony with the Tao, and that will lead to the greater sense of well-being for all concerned, right? So they'll say that you take a baby, and when the baby is born, they taught that the baby is born in a natural state of being in harmony with the Tao, right? The baby is, and the metaphor they use is the baby is like an uncarved wood block, an uncarved block of wood that just naturally is in harmony with the Tao. There's a natural flow of the grain of the wood in that block of wood, right? But then in human society and conditioning, we take that baby and we start to carve up that wood block. And we instill in that baby that, no, this is not good. This is bad. You should do this. You need to go to school. You need to get those degrees. You need to become a doctor and become powerful and wealthy and rich and have a good profession and have high respect in society and become somebody. And you get all this conditioning imposed upon a child, where then you implant in them this ambition that they have to succeed. They have to get all this education and get that A+ so they can get to med school and then make lots of money and get a powerful position in politics, and on it goes. So what happens, you take a child that is innocent and pure and has no desires. All that a little child wants is to be loved, to have food, to be able to have freedom to play and to be hugged, and just have very minimal desires. And we just naturally have very few desires. We just need our basic needs met, and we're quite content. But through social conditioning, we're taught and told that, no, that is not good enough. Oh, no, it's not good enough just to live such a simple life. You have to succeed. You need to get ahead. You have to have so much status and success and yada, yada, yada. All right. So then they are driven by this ambition that gets implanted in them. And then they start to go against the Tao and create all this havoc in society, which leads to suffering for others. And so this is the human problem, is the social conditioning. Why? Because we've judged certain things, that this is what's good and this is what's bad. And then we mold ourselves and try to coerce upon life, upon nature, right? Upon reality, what we think how things should be. And we go against the Tao. And so in Daoist philosophy, the goal here is to return to our original nature, to return to that original natural state of being where we are naturally in harmony with the Tao, right? As the baby would be. And so what we need to do is we need to undo what's been done to us, uncarve that wood block, uncarve the wood block, get rid of all that social conditioning. So how do you go about doing that? Okay, a few key things here. Number one, you first of all need to return to a very simple life in nature itself. Withdraw from society, withdraw from, urban life, and live in nature, in the forest. A very simple life of just having your basic needs met for basic shelter, basic food, and that's it. You just live in harmony with nature. And that's what Chuang Tzu did, right? And you'll find this in Daoism. There'll be Daoist type of monasteries. They're sort of like spiritual retreat centers in the forest, in the wilderness, where you're living outside of the city to be in harmony with nature, where you would then engage in various spiritual practices, okay? Sort of like an ashram in India, similar ideas here. So that's number one, returning to a simple life in nature like that. Number two, you would practice what they called sitting in forgetfulness, which is a form of meditation, where you simply would sit in stillness and try to forget all of that social conditioning that has happened. All that has been implanted in your psyche as to what's right and wrong and what you should do and what you shouldn't do, right? And what you have judged as being good and bad. You need to clear all of that out, uncarve the wood block, right? That has disconnected you from living in harmony with the Tao, okay? So you have that focus of meditative practice to do that. Then thirdly, you embrace what they call the doctrine of no knowledge. You need to unlearn the traditional rationalizations that have been implanted in you through society, through the usual education system, where you're approaching reality, approaching life simply from the head, simply from the brain up here, through reason and logic and rational analysis. And it's held that will interfere with the wisdom that comes deep within from the Tao itself. So for example, excuse me, just need a sip of water. So, for example, a metaphor that's even used by Chuang Tzu is that of a butcher. And so you'll have three different types of people. You'll have somebody like me who doesn't know how to cut up a chicken properly, okay, when I'm making supper. And I'll have my knife here, and there's that chicken. And I don't really know at all where to cut that chicken. I never went to butchery school to learn the proper place of cutting a chicken. So I'm just battling it out and trying to rip it apart and chopping here and chopping there. And I'm making a mess, and it becomes just totally a banged up chicken, right? All messed up. But then if I went to butchery school, I would learn the proper way of cutting a chicken based on rational analysis, right? So that I know, well, this is where the cartilage is here between, the drumstick and the thigh, and that this is where you cut it properly and whatnot. So you kind of learn the proper ways of cutting a chicken, but it's through the use of reason, through having been educated. And so again, through study and rational analysis, you learn how to properly cut a chicken. And then you get the Daoist, okay, who does not rely upon reason and rational analysis. Instead, his sense of self and beingness is grounded deeper. It does not come from the head, but it comes from the core, comes from his belly, from the solar plexus, right? The core part of himself. He tunes into that because that's the core of where the Tao is, where you become one with the Tao. And then it's that he will then, through becoming one with the Tao, he then, it sounds hokey here, but he becomes one with the chicken because it's all the Tao. He's just going to become one with the flow of the Tao. And as he's one with the Tao, he'll be one with the chicken. And he'll then take that butchery knife, right? And he then will be able to cut exactly in the best places without any effort, without through the ego coming in and analyzing and saying, calculating, this is the right place to cut right here. It's like, no, it's the Tao within him and the Tao within the chicken. They kind of link up. And so then as I surrender to the Tao and I am one with the Tao, I can just easily whoosh, whoosh, whoosh with effort, without any effort, right? I can just slice up that chicken effortlessly. Right? That's through the use of doctrine of no knowledge. It's a wisdom that comes from within through connection to the Tao. And as a result of being one with the Tao, that knife, it stays sharp because there's no resistance. The knife goes with the Tao instead of going against the Tao where there's resistance. For me, out of total ignorance, my knife gets dull very quickly because I don't know how on earth to cut. Somebody who went to butchery school, well, their knife is in better shape. They'll have to sharpen it every month, okay, because they do know how to cut, whereas I'd have to sharpen mine every week, right? But the Daoist, it becomes as sharp as anything all the time, right? Because it's without effort. There's no resistance of any kind when he does the action. So that then ties in with the practice of Wu Wei, actionless action. The two go hand in hand. The doctrine of no knowledge is sort of like how you operate in terms of what is your source of guidance here? What do you depend upon for knowing what to do? And if you depend upon the Tao, then your action, okay, in terms of what you do, being guided by wisdom through oneness with the Tao, that action then becomes effortless. There's no striving. There's no controlling. It's just a flow of the Tao through you, without any kind of obstruction of the ego mind, okay? And this is a key thing that shows up in martial arts. You see this in martial arts. And I don't know if you've ever seen this. I think it was called Bloodsport, if I remember, a movie done a long, long time ago with Claude Van Damme. I think that's what his name was. And he was going through some martial arts training, and he was going to be going into this big fight. And his master had trained him to fight while being blindfolded, so that he would not rely upon his sight, his vision, and seeing his opponent and being able to read his body language and analyze what the next move might be and have all these strategies in his mind. It's all about calculation, rational calculations to make the right move in a martial arts. It's like, no, when you're blindfolded, you can't see. You cannot depend and rely upon the ego mind. You have to become one with the Tao and let the Tao guide you. You can feel and know. Your consciousness goes from your head to your belly. In Japanese culture, society, they call it hara, where consciousness goes into the belly. And it's from that inner knowing of becoming one with the Tao, and it's not coming from your ego, that then you'll be led into the right move at the right time. And so in that movie, as he's in this big fight with this guy, his opponent cheated and threw some dust into his eyes, so he was blind. And so he then had to rely upon the training he had from his master of being blindfolded, that he'd be able to sense and just know what move his opponent was doing. And I like watching some of this stuff. Anyways, on Netflix, there's really good, the Marco Polo series. It's really good to watch. You should watch it sometime. They have in there, it's about Marco Polo being over in China, and there's a monk there who is I think he's called 100 Eyes. He's blind. Okay, he's been blinded, but he was sort of a Shaolin monk, and a pro in martial arts, but totally blind. And he'll take on 10, 20 guys, right, and just knock them all off because he's just one with the Tao. So this is a key thing that shows up in a lot of the martial arts. And also in Zen, aspects of Zen too, it shows up there. Daoism had a lot of influence on Zen Buddhism. So anyways, these are key ideas in Daoist philosophy, all right? This idea of no knowledge and the practice of wu-wei. And I have to mention, it shows up in Star Wars. Star Wars is totally Daoist. The Force, may the Force be with you, is the Tao, right? And when Luke Skywalker is learning how to do the, what do you call the swords, the Jedi sword thing that he's, what's it called? The lightsaber thing that he's learning how to use. And Obi-Wan Kenobi, or whatever his name is training him. What does he do? He puts a helmet over his head so he can't rely upon his sight. And he has to become one with the Force and let the Force wield, this lightsaber through him, right? It's totally Daoist, okay? Total Daoist philosophy, right, in that film. Okay. I think you get the idea here. Okay. So this is the goal here. In philosophical Daoism, this is the goal, is to return to your original nature, to become in harmony with the Tao, and to follow these steps. This is philosophical Daoism. Okay. Now we move on to religious Daoism. Now, religious Daoism has its roots in the quest for physical immortality. That we have evidence of people believing and searching and thinking such things going back to about the 8th century BC. And here I don't mean spiritual or immortality of the soul. I'm talking about physical immortality, that you can transform this physical body to overcome, all right, death and not succumb to death, all right, that you can make this body incorruptible, that it can continue on, right? And so legends appear that there exists these magical islands out there and magical mountains and places where there lived these beings known as the Immortals. Wow, and I'm seeing here. Oh, yeah, I was going to read some passages. Yeah, I see there was an emperor's. Oh, I guess I didn't type that in there. But anyway, there's Immortals known as the Shin, and who were able to overcome death, and they have these superpowers. And we have references of this sort of idea going back to the Chuang-Tzu and Lao-Tzu itself. Let me just get here. I should have gotten these up here. Some passages. And also emperors of China had sent ships and expeditions of various people in search of these legendary places to find these legendary immortals to gain their secrets to immortality. And we have, those sorts of stories there in Chinese texts and tradition. So let me just read to you a couple of passages here. Let me see here. Here's one coming from Trunks to this one specifically. That it goes like this. It says, there is a holy man, sort of immortal, who lives on faraway Kushi mountain, has skin that's like ice or snow, is gentle and shy like a young girl. He doesn't eat the 5 grains. That's going to become important, okay? Doesn't eat the 5 grains, but sucks the wind and drinks the dew, right? He doesn't have to eat anything. He climbs up on the clouds and mist and rides on a flying dragon and wanders beyond the 4 seas. And by concentrating his spirit, he can protect creatures from sickness and plague and make the harvest plentiful. So he has these superpowers, okay? Another passage. Oh, the perfect man, again, the immortal, can walk underwater without choking, can walk on fire without being burned, and can travel above this world of 10,000 things. And how can he do this, you ask? It's because he guards the pure breath. The breath of the immortal, right, comes from his heels, while ordinary men just breathe from their throats. So it's about working with breath. And as you probably know, a key word for breath in the Chinese tradition is qi. Okay, qi energy. He knows how to work qi energy, the energy that's in all life, all of the universe. Within me, it's flowing within me, it's flowing in all of nature. Knowing how to work that energy to have these sorts of effects. So here is held that they can attain superpowers, do what's the impossible, walk on water, walk on fire and go underwater without drowning, not having to, breathe air, fly through the sky on a dragon, transcend time, transcend space. They overcome death. They have superpowers to heal and protect, animals and crops and these various things. Okay. So these are the immortals. Let me read you another passage here. This comes from a text with respect to the emperor of China at the time of 133 BC, where someone appeared before the emperor and who told him that through worshiping the stove god and through a method of not eating the grains, he said that he knew how to avoid old age. And so he told the emperor, you should worship the stove god, and then you can make these beings appear before you. All right. And once these beings have appeared before you, like spiritual beings appear before you, you can take base metals like mercury, all right, and transform it into gold. When that gold has been made, it can then be used for vessels for drinking and eating, and it will increase the length of your life. And when the length of your life has been increased, the immortals of Peng Lai on this island out in the ocean, they will give you audience. They will appear before you. And by making sacrifices before them, you will never die. And that is what the Yellow Emperor, the founder of China, the Chinese people, did. Okay. And your subject has indeed traveled across the ocean and has met with these immortals, all right? And he kind of, talks about it. So after hearing this, the Emperor Wu, for the first time began to worship the stove god, and he sent various people out to seek for these immortals on that island and started to pay attention to transforming mercury and lead and various concoctions into gold. And so this is then what gives birth to what's known as external alchemy. As you can see there, external alchemy. Various practices that was believed that literally could effect physical immortality for people, right? And this really gets started to develop around the 3rd century BC, and then basically fizzles, is pretty much finished by 1000 CE, and then gets replaced by internal alchemy, which I'll talk about on the next slide. Okay, internal alchemy. But anyway, but the key ideas here in external alchemy is that you would involve fasting periods, aspects of your diet, like I mentioned here, not eating of the grains, any of the grains, but worshiping the stove god, making offerings to the stove god. Okay, but to live without sin, because it's believed that any kind of evil act or sin that you commit, it shortens your lifespan. It shortens your lifespan. It involved the intake of some kind of concoction, whereas believed you could take certain metals like mercury and whatnot and transform them into gold and ingest that. Okay, and that would literally preserve the body so it doesn't get overtaken by death. And what's interesting is that archaeologists have dug up a body. I got that here on a sheet of paper somewhere. Where is it? Oh, I have notes and I can't ever find anything. Uh, what was it of about? Where is it here? Of the second century BC, they dug up the body of a woman. She was of the upper class, a 50-year-old noble woman, and of the second century BCE, before the Common Era, and so that's like 2,200 years ago. And this body was so well preserved, it looked as though it had been dead for only 1 to 2 weeks. All the tissue was totally intact, still soft. You could touch the skin and the flesh, and it would kind of bounce back. All right. And they found that the body had been preserved by having been immersed in a liquid that contained mercuric sulfide. And that also there was some of that ingested, like in our digestive system, right, in our internal organs. And it was just amazing. It was very impressive how well preserved this body was. And so, maybe in doing this sort of practice and seeing how the body just didn't decay, it seemed that indeed, this is true. This is how this stuff works. It actually, has an effect. So these are some of the practices that develop here. External alchemy. And it's so interesting that you have some similar ideas here as you do in the West with, the tradition of alchemy in the West, of turning lead into gold. And how that also became spiritualized in the West, that is a symbol for a spiritual journey of going from human to divine. And in a sense, a similar thing happens here in China as well. External alchemy will eventually become and turn into internal alchemy. So what happens is that over the centuries, many of these ideas and practices they evolve. Okay, they get developed again over hundreds of years, right? And a lot of ideas and practices will develop into aspects of Chinese medicine, right? Along with things like Qigong and Tai Chi, working with energy, acupuncture and acupressure and whatnot, the whole idea of the body with meridians, these conduits of energy that flow through the body and all these sorts of things. And basically what happens is that external alchemy eventually becomes spiritualized. The external part of it becomes seen as symbolic of spiritual practices that are taking place, spiritual processes. So instead of it literally involving lead and mercury and doing things like that, they started to symbolize spiritual processes of working with your chi energy, or the breath. Breath is tied in with chi energy, and your vital essence known as jing, okay, your vital essence. And by nurturing these, that then in turn will nurture your soul or your spirit, called shen. Okay? And these three things become known as the three treasures that are located in the body. And through various practices of like meditation and visualization and breathing and exercise and whatnot, that you can then obviously improve your health and vitality, but also longevity, have a long life. And the idea is somehow attain a form of immortality. I just need to pause and have some water here for a sec. And so, yeah, all kinds of things get developed here, okay? And it's really quite complex. This is where things are going to become a bit sectarian. You'll have different Daoist masters they'll have their own particular teachings, their own particular practices, and it becomes really, really complex. And a lot of this material is quite foreign to people in the West. It's just in more recent years are some of these Daoist masters and teachers and various sects making themselves available to the West through, some of their material being translated into English. A lot of it was rather secretive, kept within that particular school of thought, only passed down from master to student, father to son, like very much guarded secrets, right? So again, I'm just going to highlight and just to give you a bit of an idea of some of the practices involved here, okay? So various kinds of techniques for meditation and visualization, and we talk about visualization today, has become a popular thing, but they blatantly refer to, through meditation that you can then tune in and attain a form of inner vision. It's like you can go inside your body and see things inside your body. You can kind of tune in and have vision of things even out there in the universe. Attain vision of the various deities and gods, a vision of where, how, and what way energy is flowing in your body or around you, right? And through the power of vision, this inner vision, you can undo blockages and shift them in ways, right? All through the power of inner vision. So again, all kinds of different ideas here, but here's one, for example. It was held that you have within your body, here the language is 36,000 deities, but located within the body, and it's like there's a deity, a god associated with every single body part. Right? So there's a God associated with my heart, with my liver, with my kidney, with this knuckle and that knuckle, with this toe, with that finger, with the knee here, with like every part of the body has a deity associated with it. And they have a name and they have their particular function of overseeing that particular part of your body. And so for you to be healthy, you need to keep these gods happy. They need to be in place. They need to be in power. And so you can recharge them and re-empower the gods within your body through a ritual that was known as thunder magic, where at a time of a big thunderstorm happening, you would go out there and you would visualize that the gods within you, in your body, would connect with the 36,000 gods that also exist out there in the universe. All right. So just like as we've seen in India with Hinduism, and you see this all over the world really, is the idea that the human being is a microcosm, a miniature version of the larger universe, of the macrocosm. And that was out there in the universe is also can be found within the self. And that there is this interconnection, a link between the self and the universe. And so at the time of a thunderstorm, through this inner vision, you would then create a connection between the gods out there with the gods within the body, and each one being connected. And is that you then kind of plug in, like literally plugging yourself into a socket and getting recharged. You're recharging the gods within by the gods without, okay? The gods in the universe. That's just to give you a bit of an idea, right? Now, I say gods here, but really, you know how today people talk about body intelligence, the wisdom in the body, the intuition of the body, that you can speak to your body. You can speak to particular body parts and to ask, oh, knee, why are you hurting so much? What is the problem here? What do you need? You can speak to the intelligence within the body. And I suspect that this is what they're doing. But of course, in that context and world and the concepts they're working with, they call them separate, different gods. But they're just, this is an intelligence within the body, within every cell. There's, many scientists today and on the leading cutting edge are saying there's intelligence within every cell of the body. We're learning things that are blowing people's minds. A lot of the mainstream medicine and the usual things that are taught in med school still today is out of date. A lot of it is really out of date. Okay, I get a bit angry about it. So much is out of date in all kinds of ways. But there's a lot that we've been understanding more that, wow, it's mind-blowing. Indeed, there is intelligence. There's evidence of consciousness in every bloomin' cell. And that we are an amazing thing. We're the greatest mysteries walking on the planet. We need to be in awe of life and of who we all are and what all is, really. But anyways, I'm getting off on this here. So there's this intelligence within the body, right, that you need to tune in. And so the idea here is you need to make the gods happy, keep the gods happy in various ways. So this is where now diet comes in. And it's held that, yes, you have these 36,000 gods within the body, but you also have these other dudes. You have the three worms. And the three worms, they're like parasites. They want to suck the life out of you, and they will bring death to you, all right? They're bad news. And so what you want to do is you want to starve the three worms. And they feed off of the grains.
And that's why you find often here, I've already made reference a couple times, you don't eat the 5 grains, any of the grains. So that's one thing. You need to starve the worms. And then on the other hand, you want to keep the inner gods happy, right? Those 36,000 gods. And they don't like the smell of wine, meat, or stinky vegetables like onions, garlic, leek, all right? They don't like that stuff. So you don't eat any of that. So ideally, then, you'd have a bit of a restricted diet. Ideally, you want to have as minimal of a diet as possible. And the less you eat, the more light you are, the more young energy you would have, Y-A-N-G, young energy. And the ideal is to come to a place where you don't even have to eat. You can drink the dew and suck the wind, as I read in Chuang-Tzu. Okay. Now, how does that work? The idea here, remember how I talked about that? I mentioned, like he mentioned in that passage too, that the immortal breathes differently. He breathes, he brings in breath, the energy, the chi energy of the universe. He brings in that energy through his heels. The ordinary person does it through their throat, like breathing, right? There's a different way of breathing. And through breath, through breathing in a certain kind of way, in a type of meditative way, you bring in the energy that's around you in the universe into your body, and have that energy then, by directing it to nurture your inner organs, right? And bring vitality to your being and feed your physical being, right? Directed to through intention. Then you don't need food. You're bypassing the whole process of transforming energy from food, where I eat the food and it goes through the digestion process, and that energy that's in the food gets transformed, right, into another form that my body, through digestion, then uses that energy to nurture the body. Okay, so that's how we get the food. We can get the energy to nurture our body energy. And here is how no, you could bypass that whole system by doing it through visualization in the right kind of a way, right? A certain way of meditating and visualizing, that you can do it without actually going through that process of eating food. Now, what's interesting is, I've come across all interesting things. I could always babble on here, but just so silver, for example, ionic silver, like I got some and I use it for fighting viruses. If I feel a bit low, like as though I'm coming down with something, I will take some ionic silver. I had a student, going back into, this alchemy bit about ingesting silver metals, like various things, like, there's some things here to consider. I had a student years ago when I was teaching this in class, and she came up to me after and says, she had some strange disease, very rare type of disease. And she literally did have to ingest some kind of type of gold in order to sustain her life. If she didn't, she would die. And I can't remember what the disease was, never heard of it. But she was really quite shocked, in just hearing this. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I also come across, in the West, there's various stories about different Catholic nuns and people in the Catholic Church who claimed that they didn't eat or drink anything other than Mass, taking at the Eucharist, taking that little piece of bread, that little bit of wine. That was it. That's all they would eat or drink, and they lived off of that. So you have those sorts of stories, and eons ago at a health food store, there was a poster up of these people giving a talk somewhere. They called themselves the breatharians, and exactly this was their teaching: is you don't have to eat. You can just live off of breath alone if you know how to work it. Right? So I've come across these various things here that I just find interesting, and I just want to bring in the connection here that there could be something to all this stuff. All right. Okay, so another thing besides diet and visualizations and meditations is exercise. It's just how you move the body to ensure a healthy circulation of that chi energy. And that's why things like Tai Chi and also Qigong is kind of both movement and meditation, right? It's like, this is how you then are in harmony with the Tao. And then there's a healthy flow of that energy. And just even the classic moves within Tai Chi is to imitate the movement of the Tao, from just standing there and going from non-being and to the beginning of coming into beingness, there is then the yin and the yang. The left hand and the right hand slowly starts to come up. And it's very interesting. It's just sort of like a natural move. And you're allowing the Tao within you to make those moves. And I've found, again, just for myself personally, right? Doing my own kind of things that I do, meditations and whatnot, I've found, I really am convinced that a lot of these practices and traditions, they just come naturally from you just kind of tuning in and allowing the movement to happen on its own. It just happens on its own. You'll just be led to bring those hands up, and you'll just feel the energy coming through your hands, and you'll just be led as to what to do with that energy. It's very, very interesting. And I think that's where a lot of the energy healing traditions, they come directly from people experiencing these things, and then it gets institutionalized. They put it into package and a formula. Well, you do this and then this step and that step. And unfortunately, then people, they just do it from the head, and they don't really go deeper and just tune in and allow you to be led from within by that energy and allow it to move and do through you instead of you coming from the head. Okay. Anyway, that's just my take on it from what I've seen and experienced. Okay, so exercise is a key thing. Lastly is various forms of Daoist Tantra. Just as there's Hindu Tantra, Buddhist Tantra, there's Daoist Tantra as well. And what we have here is the idea that, and you'll come across this in the history of religion, is sexual energy is really potent, powerful stuff. Okay. And so when that sexual arousal is brought about and that energy is raised, from coming into that orgasm, right? It just intensifies this energy. Here in the Taoist tradition, it's like, you keep that energy. You don't expel it through an orgasm, through ejaculation. Okay, I shouldn't say orgasm. You have the orgasm, but you don't ejaculate. You withhold that ejaculation. And so that energy that's raised through the orgasm, you through meditation, visualization, you retain that energy and you store it in the body. And generally here it was held that you restore it, it would be stored in the brain area of the head. Okay. And that's why if you look at Daoist artwork and paintings of Daoist monks, they'll have really abnormally large skulls. And it's like, oh yeah, they've really got it loaded up there. All right. They've got all this young energy stored up there so that they will then have a long life. It's sort of that life force energy. And so it's held that whenever you do ejaculate, you've lost life energy. And it shortens your lifespan. That's bad news there for a lot of people, I guess. But it just will lessen your longevity. So you'd have these rituals, and again, it would be pretty complex, where you'd, well, anyways, it's like 10 different women in one night, and it'd be, again, it's not like, let's have an orgy kind of a thing, at Joe's party on Saturday or something. It's, again, taken all very seriously, just as all tantric traditions are. Okay. But it's meant to bring in that energy into your being, into your body, and it's stored there. Okay. So from all these teachings and practices and whatnot, there's a couple of things that happen here. First of all, there'll be two types of religious Daoism that get established. There will be what I sort of would call monastic type retreats that are led by Daoist masters. And these are sort of equivalent to ashrams in India, where you have a yogi master, the guru, right? Who then, would be celibate, would not be a householder, would not have a family and a job and all of that, but is just dedicated to being a spiritual type of leader. And so this would be located outside of the city in secluded rural areas. And it was a type of like a retreat center where these masters then would teach their vision, their version of this sort of internal alchemy kind of stuff. Their version of the martial arts, meditation, diet, various esoteric practices that all around, would enhance your health and vitality, longevity of life, developing some superpowers, like paranormal phenomena, psychic abilities, working with energy and being able to do amazing things with energy. And eventually, here, the idea of becoming immortal is seen as really attaining more of a form of enlightenment. And it's like, and this is where it would be against, say, Buddhist teachings of reincarnation. It's like, no, you don't want to get reincarnated. You want to transcend reincarnation. You want to move up to a higher level. And exactly what that all entails, I really don't know and can't speak on it. Okay, but this is generally the idea. And again, this is where it gets somewhat sectarian. You've got different teachers and schools of thought here. Okay, so that's one form of monastic type retreats run by Daoist masters. And so here, individuals go there. They will go and live there, spend quite some time there, maybe a long time, short time, whatever, to receive these trainings. And it's outside of the city. It's a full-time commitment. It's not like they can do it part-time on Saturdays and yet go to work every day or something. No, it's geared for individuals who want to live in this sort of monastic type retreat center, okay? Well, then you also have, on the other hand, the opposite end of this are temples, Daoist type temples that are in the cities, in urban centers, run by Daoist priests. And here they meet the needs of the people in the city who, go to work, have a job, have a family. And these Daoist priests are not celibate, but they will have family. And usually the priesthood is passed down from father to son, and it becomes rather dynastic, okay, run in the family. And so here they'll meet the spiritual needs of the people by doing various services of, funeral rituals, exorcisms, clearing out, evil spirits, removing curses. The Taoists are mostly known for exorcism. They're held to be more powerful than Buddhists for doing that sort of a thing, okay? Healings of any kind that you would need. In the one video, I think that I want, the class to watch, you'll see where in a Taoist church or temple, they will contact the spirit of a dead person, of a father of a family or the grandfather or whoever, the head of the family, who's passed on. They will be contacting him to get some guidance, to get an answer to a question, okay, to kind of get some advice from. And it's very similar to the use of a Ouija board that happens, but sort of like Chinese version, where two guys go into trance. And then they'll start holding up a chair, the legs of a chair, one guy at one side and the other guy on the other side. And as they go into trance, and there's like a rattle going, shaking, and they start going into trance, just like shamanic drumming, okay, repetitive sound. And that repetition kind of gets you into a bit of a trance state. And then they'll get kind of feeling like they're getting taken over by a spirit guiding them in writing out Chinese characters on a table, and somebody else is watching it, and he'll write down what the answer is to the question. Okay, that's so it's very similar to the Ouija board, where you have two people on the Ouija board, and it's held then that the spirit will guide you to spell out the letters. I mean, it's so interesting, West and East, so many similar practices. I mean, I see this all the time, all these sorts of things. So it's interesting. So this is what would happen, for example, in a Taoist temple. And a big thing is, as you see in that film, if you watch that film, I want you to see, where you'll see a funeral ritual taking place. And where the priest will, on behalf of the dead relative, will set things up that, and this is where Buddhist influence came in, is that the soul will have to journey through these hells in order to get to heaven. And so they provide assistance for the soul to quickly go through these hells. And the Taoist priest has the spiritual authority. He knows all those hells and the guardians of each hell and the judges of each hell. And he'll write on a piece of paper, a writ of pardon, a certificate. And also with some fake money as bribery, and they'll kind of have a messenger writing on a phoenix or something, and they'll make all of this out of paper, right? And then they'll set it on fire, and then the messenger will take this writ of pardon plus the money to bribe any judges or gatekeepers to really help this dead grandmother to quickly get through these hells. Okay, and the Daoist priest has the authority to do this. This is sort of the idea, because he knows the names of all the gods, all the spirits of all the different dimensions. It's like he's got that knowledge and therefore authority over them. And so he'll kind of do that, and then they'll build this beautiful mansion out of paper that the dead grandmother can then live in heaven once she gets through these hells quickly. And they'll build this, and then also they burn it at the end, because that's how it gets transformed from material to spiritual. As it's put through the fire, it goes like alchemy, a form of transformation. The physical becomes spiritual, right? And it goes into the spirit world. And this then will be her home on the other side. So anyways, you'll have this sort of thing. And you can see, always I could babble on here, but elements in Daoist rituals like this, there also is evidence of ancient shamanic type of things, of journeying to the lower world and the upper world. All right. And the Daoist priests kind of do that. They symbolize that they're making a journey to these other worlds by doing these somersault and flips, as though they're making a journey to these other worlds. That's how it then becomes institutionalized and turned into a ritual by these acrobatic kind of dramatic event of these guys doing all these flips and doing these things. And, it's become a substitute for what the shaman actually originally did, through going into an altered state and literally going into these other worlds to assist the spirit making its journey, making its passage on the other side. Okay, because that's very ancient. You see that in all traditions, right? Assisting the soul to make its journey on the other side in a peaceful and healthy way. And so a lot of these traditions then eventually they become somewhat dead and then institutionalized in ways, rituals that really for a lot of people are rather dead rituals. This is what you see happening often in the history of religion. Now, these Daoist priests and temples, a lot of these become various sects, and how a lot of them began was, hundreds or thousands of years ago. Certain Daoists go into meditation and get some kind of revelatory experience. They may have, Lao Tzu appeared to them in a vision and start speaking to them, giving them revelations. And so they get then these teachings and revelations by various beings. And then they start get a gathering around them, a bit of a following. And then it becomes increasingly institutionalized. Their teachings turned into a book, and it becomes a temple, and gets located in the city, and then then pass it down from father to son. And that's a lot of how a lot of these begin, is through individuals having some kind of profound experiences, and that becoming then institutionalized, right? And then you get various sects that emerge. Okay, and this is the story of religion, isn't it? Okay, that's what all goes on. Hopefully all this makes sense, okay? Okay, so those are the two basic types of religious Taoism, how that shows up. So some concluding remarks here. Daozang, that's the phrase or term for a collection of texts that make up the Daoist scriptures. And there's over 1,000 of these texts that were compiled over 15 centuries. Okay. And this is another thing, like I mentioned when I talked about Buddhism, like we're dealing with thousands of texts there. You've got this Tibetan collection, the Chinese collection, the Pali collection, of early Buddhism. No one person can master all the texts of Buddhism. And even here, I don't think any one person can master all this collection. It's huge compared to what we in the West are so accustomed to, just the Bible or the Quran. It's very simple in comparison, especially the Quran. Just one person who wrote it, 20 years. That's the shortest of all scriptures that we've got there. Anyway, so this is what you have, and they're basically include all kinds of things. You have here manuals describing in detail the various deities, okay, literally thousands of details, their name, their function, their power, how you can access them and use their powers for various purposes. You have in here descriptions of various techniques for both inner or internal and external alchemy, right? Plus various forms of Daoist yoga. I mean, you got texts there talking about like the chakras centers as well, and Daoist tantra, very similar, and probably, I'm sure they had their connections. So definitely, there's a lot of interaction between China and India. And then again, details of how to do all kinds of rituals, the healings, and various things I just mentioned here in terms of religious Taoism, and of course biographies of a lot of the famous Taoists, and some of the medical teachings or regarding health and longevity. Okay, that a lot of this goes into Chinese medicine. Okay, all this stuff is in there. Now, Buddhism, though, generally displaces any quest for immortality with the idea of reincarnation for a lot of the Chinese people. Because again, I got this under the topic of religion in China. And whereas Taoist ideas, generally speaking, are more embedded in basic living practices in healthcare, exercises and meditations, classic things like Tai Chi and Qigong, Chinese medicine. That's where a lot of Taoist ideas show up. Okay. And this whole idea of being in harmony with nature and going with the flow of things that way. That's a key thing of Chinese culture. Okay. All right. So I shall end that here. If I can. Why is this? There we go. Okay.